Impossible. The Alpha King went into shock seeing the child sleeping with his wolves. Towering trees twisted their branches like gnarled fingers, reaching toward the pale moonlight that filtered through the mist. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and pine, and somewhere deep in the darkness, creatures stirred, unseen but ever watchful. Kalen, the Alpha King, moved silently along the forest path. His cloak, dark as midnight, brushed against the ferns, and his boots made no sound on the soft ground. He had ruled these lands for decades, not merely as a king of men, but as a master of the supernatural wolves that prowled under his command. They were creatures of fierce loyalty and terrifying power, bound to him by blood and magic. His word was law among them, and their strength had made him untouchable. Yet tonight there was unease in the wind. Kalen's sharp eyes, colored the deep gray of storm clouds, scanned the shadows. The wolves were restless, their growls low and tense. Something unusual had stirred them, and it was not the wind nor the scent of a distant hunter. Then in a small clearing Kalen saw it, a child, a tiny human, lying asleep on a bed of moss. The boy's hair was dark and tangled, dusted with leaves and dew. But what struck Kalen most was the circle of wolves around him. The beasts, usually so wild and unpredictable, lay down as if guarding the child with a reverence that made Kalen's heart tighten. Their eyes glimmered in the dim moonlight, reflecting loyalty, wariness, and something he had never seen before, submission. "Impossible," Kalen muttered, stepping closer, his voice low and sharp. Wolves were not meant to kneel, not even to him. And yet here they were, surrounding this small human with careful attention. The child stirred, blinking sleep from wide, curious eyes. He did not scream or cry. Instead, he smiled faintly, as if he had expected Kalen all along. The Alpha King froze, heart pounding, as the realization settled in his mind. This boy was different. The wolves' leader, a massive black wolf with scars across his muzzle, rose slowly. He did not snarl, he did not bare his teeth. Instead, he stepped aside, nudging the child gently with his nose, allowing Kalen to approach. The air was thick with tension, but there was no threat here, only something that felt like destiny, pulling Kalen forward against his will. Kalen knelt, careful not to startle the child. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice firm yet unusually gentle. The child's eyes held no fear, only a quiet certainty. "I am called Lysander," he said softly, "and I belong here." Kalen's breath caught, "belong here to the wolves." To him, the words were small, yet heavy with a meaning he could not yet grasp. He glanced at his pack. Their hackles were down. Their bodies relaxed, but their eyes never left him, as if they were waiting for him to decide whether to accept or reject this impossible bond. "You are human," Kalen said, disbelief lacing his tone. "You cannot belong here. Wolves do not take human companions lightly, and his voice faltered. "I do not know what this is." Lysander tilted his head, observing the Alpha King with quiet amusement. "I do not need to know what it is," he replied. "I only need to be." The word struck Kalen with a force that made him stagger slightly. To simply exist here, in the midst of his most loyal and dangerous creatures, without fear, without doubt, it was audacious. And strangely, it stirred something in him he had thought long dead. Curiosity, wonder, something like hope. The wolves shifted subtly, moving closer around the boy, their presence protective yet calming. Kalen could feel their loyalty, their unwavering devotion, as though they had waited for this moment their entire lives. And yet, they did not growl at him, did not challenge him. They only acknowledged the child. Kalen's fingers twitched as he reached toward Lysander. The boy did not flinch. The Alpha King's hand hovered above the child's hair, unsure whether to touch or to pull back. The tension in the clearing was like a living thing, breathing, waiting. Then, slowly, Kalen laid a hand on Lysander's shoulder. The wolves all lowered their heads in unison. Their eyes, once sharp with suspicion, now glowed softly with approval. Kalen felt a shiver run down his spine. This was no ordinary child. no ordinary human. He had entered a circle of power far beyond what he had imagined, a circle where his authority could not simply command, it had to earn trust. Kalen rose, keeping his eyes on Lysander. "You are far from home," he said, voice low. "Do you understand what you are doing here?" "I am not far from where I need to be," Lysander replied. His tone was calm yet firm, carrying a weight of wisdom Kalen could not yet place in a child. "I have been guided here to you." The Alpha King's heart tightened. Guided to him. By whom or what? He knew the forest, its paths, and the creatures within. None had led a human here, especially not a child. His mind raced, imagining curses, prophecies, magic beyond reckoning. And yet, something in Lysander's presence felt familiar, almost like an echo of something Kalen had long forgotten. "Wolves do not take orders from humans," Kalen muttered, almost to himself. "They follow me, only me." And yet, as he watched, the largest wolf, the scarred leader, nudged Lysander gently, then looked up at Kalen with eyes full of trust, as if silently daring him to challenge what was unfolding. Kalen's mind twisted in confusion and disbelief. He had never known fear, not for his life, not for his throne, not for his kingdom. But now he felt something foreign and unsettling. The fear of losing control, the fear of being vulnerable, the fear that this child could change everything he had ever known. Lysander stirred again, sitting up slowly. He looked at Kalen, eyes wide and unwavering. "I am not your enemy," he said, "and I am not a threat." Kalen's hands clenched at his sides. He wanted to command, to assert dominance as he always did, yet his voice caught in his throat. "Then why are the wolves so protective of you?" The child's lips curved in a small, enigmatic smile. "Because they know what you cannot yet see," he said. "Because they know who I am and who you might become." The Alpha King's chest tightened at the words. Something ancient and dangerous stirred deep within him. A part of him, long dormant, recognized the truth in Lysander's presence, a truth he could neither name nor resist. Kalen took a step back, unsure whether to leave or stay. His instincts, honed by centuries of survival, told him that this encounter could be perilous. Yet every fiber of his being urged him forward. Something about this child called to him, drew him into a story far larger than his kingdom, larger than his power. The wolves, sensing his hesitation, shifted their position subtly, herding the child gently toward Kalen. The gesture was not aggressive but commanding. They were telling Kalen that this was no longer a choice. This child belonged within his circle, within his life, whether he accepted it or not. Kalen's eyes met Lysander's. The child's gaze was steady, unwavering, as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. Kalen felt a pull, a strange magnetic force drawing him closer. He knelt again, his hand brushing Lysander's hair. The touch was electric, not with danger but with the possibility of change, of something he had long thought impossible. "Very well," Kalen whispered, his voice barely audible over the soft rustle of the forest. "You may stay for now, but know this, the wolves obey me, and I will not tolerate defiance." Lysander nodded, calm and unafraid. "I do not intend to defy," he said. "I intend to belong." Kalen's chest tightened with a mixture of awe and fear. This child had not only entered the heart of his domain, but had also begun to unravel it, thread by thread. He could feel the boundaries of his world shifting, the foundations of his control cracking ever so slightly. The wolves, sensing the new order, relaxed further, their growls fading into soft, protective murmurs. Kalen rose, watching them carefully. Something monumental had begun, something that would change the forest, the wolves, and his own heart forever. As the night deepened and mist curled around the trees, Kalen felt the weight of what had just occurred. This child, small and human, had entered a kingdom of power and dominance, and had been accepted. Not by him, but by the wolves, and perhaps, in ways he could not yet understand, by fate itself. Kalen looked down at Lysander, who now sat quietly among the pack. "If this is a trick," he said, his voice low and dangerous, "if this is some attempt to weaken me." "It is no trick," Lysander replied softly, his eyes meeting Kaelin's with a quiet certainty. "It is only the beginning." The Alpha King's heart skipped a beat. He had faced armies, monsters, and ancient curses, but never had he faced something like this. A child who commanded the loyalty of his wolves, a child who dared to exist in the space where his authority reigned supreme. And somewhere deep in his chest, in a place long thought empty, Kaelin felt the first stirrings of something new. Fear, wonder, and perhaps hope. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the mist swirling around them like a protective veil. Kaelin knew that nothing would ever be the same again, because some bonds once formed could not be broken, and some beginnings were impossible to ignore. The morning sun rose slowly over Eldrath, casting long golden fingers across the forest floor. Mist clung stubbornly to the trees, and the air carried a chill that spoke of secrets yet to be revealed. Kaelin walked beside Lysander, his mind restless. The child had slept through the night in the wolf den, surrounded by the pack, as though nothing could harm him. Yet the Alpha King could not shake the uneasy feeling twisting in his chest. "How did you find your way here?" Kaelin asked, his voice quiet but firm. His eyes scanned the trees, as if expecting a hidden guide to emerge from the shadows. Lysander tilted his head thoughtfully. "I did not find it," he said. "I was meant to be found." The Alpha King stopped, his gray eyes narrowing. "Meant to be found by me?" "Yes," Lysander said simply, his voice carrying a weight far beyond his years. "You will understand one day." Kaelin's lips pressed into a thin line. He had ruled Eldrath for decades, yet no human, no child, had ever dared to speak to him with such certainty. Even kings and generals had bowed to his word. And yet here stood Lysander, unafraid, unshaken, as if he had a place in Kaelin's world that even Kaelin had not known existed. The wolves trailed behind them, their footsteps silent but steady. Their eyes flicked toward Kaelin constantly, but they never growled. The Alpha King felt a mix of awe and unease. These creatures, loyal beyond measure, had never accepted anyone so easily. And yet, Lysander seemed to command them without effort. They reached the edge of the forest, where the ancient stone walls of Kaelin's castle rose like dark sentinels against the morning sky. The gates opened at a whisper, the guards bowing automatically at Kaelin's presence. Yet Kaelin felt a pang of concern. Bringing a child into his home, into the heart of human politics, was a dangerous move. Not for Lysander's safety. He had seen what the wolves could do, but for the fragile balance of trust Kaelin maintained with his people. Inside the castle, Lysander's presence was met with quiet curiosity. Servants paused, their hands frozen mid-task, as though sensing that something extraordinary had entered their midst. Kaelin led the child to the solar, a room of stone and shadow where sunlight fell in thin lines across the floor. "Sit here," Kaelin said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. "Eat, you must be hungry." Lysander shook his head. "I do not need food right now, I need to understand." Kaelin frowned. "Understand what?" The child's gaze met Kaelin's. "Why I am here, why the wolves protect me, and why you hesitate." Kaelin's jaw tightened. He had expected fear, awe, even obedience from this human, but not this clarity, this boldness. Lysander spoke as though he had already studied the Alpha King's mind, dissected it, and found the truth hidden beneath centuries of pride and solitude. "You do not know," Kaelin said finally, his voice low. "No human has ever had power here or walked freely among the wolves. Do you understand what you risk?" "I understand more than you think," Lysander replied. His eyes softened, but his voice remained steady. "I risk nothing that is not already meant to be risked, and I am not afraid." Kaelin felt an odd mixture of relief and unease. There was something dangerous about a child who was unafraid. Fear kept humans alive, but Lysander's fearlessness, his certainty, was like a spark that could ignite the deepest shadows of Kaelin's heart. Days passed, and Lysander's presence changed the castle. The wolves were calmer, yet more alert. Servants whispered of the boy who could sit among the fiercest beasts without a tremor. Kalen noticed that the pack responded to the child's emotions, the smallest smile, the quietest sigh, and that the child's laughter could quiet even the most restless wolf. Kalen's own feelings shifted subtly. He found himself watching Lysander, noting every movement, every expression, with a mixture of suspicion and fascination. He had ruled Eldrath with iron control, yet the boy made him feel vulnerable. He was drawn to him, in ways he did not yet understand, and that both frightened and thrilled him. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and shadows stretched long across the castle walls, Kalen called Seraphine, his most trusted lieutenant and healer. She was a woman of quiet strength, tied to the wolves by magic older than the kingdom itself. "Seraphine," Kalen said, his tone heavy, "tell me the truth. What is this child?" Seraphine studied Lysander, who sat quietly nearby, reading from a small, tattered book he had found in the library. "He is no ordinary human," she said. "There is magic in him, old magic. The wolves recognize it. They know him in ways that even you cannot yet see." Kalen's brow furrowed. "Magic? What kind of magic?" "The kind that shifts hearts," Seraphine replied softly. "The kind that changes destiny. He is connected to something ancient, something that may even be tied to the curse you bear." Kalen felt a chill run down his spine. The curse. For centuries he had carried the burden of isolation, of unyielding power that kept love and trust just out of reach. Could this child, small, human, and fearless, be linked to the very thing that bound him? "I will not let him," Kalen began, but Seraphine placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. "Kalen," she said gently, "do not try to control this. The child will teach you what the wolves already know. You must listen, not command." Kalen's jaw tightened. To listen was to be vulnerable. To be vulnerable was to risk losing the control that had protected him for centuries. And yet, he felt that he had no choice. The child had already begun to unravel something deep within him, something he had thought untouchable. That night Kalen could not sleep. He wandered the corridors of the castle, his mind filled with questions. Why had Lysander come to him? Why had the wolves accepted him so easily? And why did the presence of a child, so small and human, stir feelings he could not name? He found himself outside the den once more, where the wolves slept in quiet rows. Lysander lay among them, eyes closed, a faint smile on his lips. Kalen watched, fascinated and conflicted. The Alpha King had faced countless enemies, walked through war and betrayal, and yet this child made him feel uncertain. One of the wolves, a silver female with eyes like liquid steel, rose and approached Kalen. She circled him slowly, sniffing, then stepped back, her gaze fixed on Lysander. Kalen understood instantly. The wolves were telling him the truth. The child belonged here, and Kalen, he was not yet ready to admit what that meant for him. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. A rider, cloaked in dark blue, arrived at the castle gates bearing news from the northern territories. "My lord," he said, bowing low, "rumors stir of a child with the power to change kingdoms. They say he is seen with wolves that obey no human." Kalen's eyes narrowed. "And you believe this rumor?" The rider hesitated. "The people speak in whispers, Alpha King, but perhaps it is true." Kalen's heart pounded. The child had already drawn attention, and not all attention was kind. Rival lords and ambitious nobles would see Lysander not as a boy, but as a weapon, something to use to their advantage. The realization filled Kalen with both rage and protective instinct. He returned to the den, where Lysander played quietly with the wolves, mimicking their movements with a laughter that was both innocent and powerful. "You see," Kalen said, his voice tight with unspoken fear, "this world is not safe for you. They will try to take you, to use you, and you will protect me?" Lysander asked, eyes bright. Kalen's chest tightened. "Yes," he admitted. The word felt heavy and true. He did not yet know how he would protect the child or what forces they might face together. But he knew one thing. He could not let harm come to him. Days turned to nights, and Kalen began to notice small, extraordinary things. The child seemed to understand the wolves in ways even Kalen did not. Lysander's laughter could calm the fiercest disputes, his touch could soothe pain, and his words carried a wisdom beyond his years. The Alpha King began to see that the child was not merely a guest. He was a teacher, guiding Kalen and his pack toward something larger, something inevitable. Yet the deeper Kalen fell into this strange bond, the more dangerous it became. He sensed eyes watching, whispers in the shadows, and a rising tension in the kingdom that threatened to erupt. The child's presence had shifted everything. The wolves were loyal, the castle was attentive, and Kalen's heart was no longer entirely his own. And then one stormy night it happened. The wind howled against the castle walls, rattling windows and shaking doors. Kalen had been pacing the solar, unable to rest, when he noticed Lysander was gone. Panic surged through him, fierce and immediate. He ran to the den, calling the child's name, but only the wolves responded, their growls low and anxious. A single pawprint glowed faintly on the stone floor, leaving a trail toward the forest. Kalen's heart clenched. The child had left, and yet the wolves did not follow. They were waiting for Kalen to act. He gritted his teeth, a storm of anger, fear, and longing raging within him. "Impossible," he whispered, echoing the words he had spoken the night he first saw Lysander among the wolves. "How can this child leave without me? How can this be happening?" The wind outside carried whispers, faint but clear. "He is your path, but only if you follow." Kalen's gray eyes narrowed with determination. Whatever lay ahead, whatever dangers waited in the shadows of Eldrath, he would not let this child vanish from his life. He would follow, and he would face whatever forces sought to claim Lysander's power. And perhaps, in doing so, he might finally learn what it meant to truly trust, to truly feel, and to truly care. The wolves growled softly, circling him protectively as if sensing the resolve settling in their Alpha King. Lysander had gone, but the bond between them was unbroken. And Kalen knew, with a certainty that burned in his chest, that this was only the beginning. The forest of Wraithwood was unlike any place Kalen had ever entered. Its trees were twisted and blackened, their bark glistening wet in the dim light. Mist swirled around gnarled roots that rose like the fingers of ancient giants, and the air was thick with the scent of decay and secrets. A place of power, danger, and forgotten magic. Kalen rode at a steady pace, his cloak dark against the shifting gray of the forest. His wolves ran beside him, their eyes alert, muscles tensed, sensing every movement, every sound. Kalen's heart was heavy with fear and determination. Lysander was somewhere in this forest, guided by forces Kalen could not see, and he would not fail. Not this time. The Alpha King's mind churned with questions. Why had Lysander gone? Why had the child ventured into this cursed place alone? And what did the whispers in the wind mean? "He is your path, but only if you follow." Kalen's hand rested on the hilt of his sword, though he knew steel would not protect him from everything here. This forest was alive, and it tested more than strength. It tested heart, courage, and the limits of will. After hours of careful travel, Kalen came to a clearing. The moonlight broke through the canopy, casting pale light over the twisted landscape. And there, at the center, stood Lysander, facing a figure cloaked in shadows. The figure moved like liquid darkness, its face hidden, but its presence radiated power. "Kalen," Lysander called softly, not turning. "You came." Kalen dismounted, keeping his eyes fixed on the figure. "I will not leave you here," he said firmly. His voice echoed in the forest, a mixture of command and fear. "Who are you? Step into the light." The shadowed figure did not move. "He has come far," it said in a voice that was both male and female, old and young, and chilling in its calmness. But to reach what is yours, you must first confront what you fear. Kalen's gray eyes narrowed. I fear nothing. Yet even as he said it, he felt the first seeds of doubt creeping into his heart. Could he face what this shadow promised? Could he protect Lysander from forces he did not understand? The child, Lysander, turned toward Kalen. Do not fear, Kalen, he said softly, stepping closer. This is the path I spoke of, the one that will reveal the truth. Kalen's heart clenched. The child had changed from a boy into a guide, a teacher in the midst of danger. He realized that Lysander's courage was not born from ignorance, but from understanding something he could not yet see. The shadow raised a hand and the forest shifted. Trees groaned and twisted, the mist thickened and the air grew heavy. The ground beneath Kalen's feet seemed to move like water. A whispering voice swirled around him, calling out names, memories, and fears long buried. Kalen's chest tightened. He felt the weight of centuries, of mistakes and regrets, of moments when pride had isolated him, of battles won and love never embraced. The shadow touched something deep within him, showing visions of what he had lost and what he had avoided. You fear weakness, the shadow said. You fear trust. You fear what this child has awakened. Kalen's hand clenched around his sword. I fear nothing, he said again, but the lie tasted bitter in his mouth. He felt fear not for himself, but for the child. And for the first time, he realized that strength was not in steel, nor in command. Strength was in courage, in surrendering control to the bond he felt with Lysander and the wolves. The child stepped forward, holding out a small hand. You must trust Kalen, Lysander said softly. Trust the wolves, trust me, trust yourself. Kalen looked at the hand, then into Lysander's eyes. There was no fear there, no hesitation, only clarity and quiet power. Kalen took a deep breath and reached out, grasping the child's hand. The moment their fingers touched, a wave of warmth and light swept through the clearing. The shadow recoiled, and the forest seemed to exhale. The mist lifted slightly, and the twisted trees straightened just enough to let the moonlight shine through. Kalen felt the first flicker of something he had long forgotten, hope, but the shadow was not defeated. It writhed and swirled, forming shapes that were familiar and painful, visions of Kalen's past mistakes, of lives he could have saved but did not, of love rejected and abandoned. The forest whispered all the doubts he had carried for centuries. You cannot protect him, the shadow hissed. You will fail, you always fail. Kalen's jaw tightened. He closed his eyes for a moment, drawing on every ounce of patience, every memory of survival. When he opened them, his gray eyes burned with determination. No, he said firmly, I will not fail. I will not allow fear to rule me. I will protect Lysander, and I will face what comes, even if it breaks me. The shadow paused, then shifted. It seemed to acknowledge his courage. Perhaps you are ready, it whispered. And then slowly it dissolved into mist, leaving the clearing quiet except for the gentle breathing of the wolves and the calm presence of Lysander. Kalen looked down at the child. Are you unharmed? He asked, relief mixing with awe. I am safe, Lysander said. Because you were brave enough to follow, because you allowed yourself to trust. Kalen's chest tightened. He realized that the child was teaching him, guiding him not with commands but with courage. Lysander's power was not just in magic or prophecy. It was in the wisdom he carried and the bond he shared with the wolves. The Alpha King lowered himself to sit beside Lysander, letting the warmth of the child's presence calm the storm within him. For the first time in centuries, Kalen allowed himself to be vulnerable, not weak, but open. Hours passed as they rested in the clearing. The wolves curled around them protectively, their eyes flicking to every shadow, every movement, but their growls were quiet, their bodies relaxed. Kalen felt the bond strengthening, not only with the wolves but with Lysander. He understood now that strength was not in solitude or fear. It was in connection, in trust, in letting someone else share the weight of power. The moon rose higher, casting silver light over the forest. Lysander leaned against Kalen, his small hand still held in the Alpha King's. "You see now," he said softly, "that courage is not the absence of fear but the choice to act despite it. And love is not weakness, Kalen, it is strength." Kalen's throat tightened. He had spent centuries believing that attachment was dangerous, that emotion could weaken him. And yet here he was, heart open, mind clear, feeling something he had thought impossible. But even as the warmth spread through him, a distant chill touched the edges of the clearing. The forest, though quieter now, still held secrets. Kalen's wolf pack stiffened, ears twitching toward the shadows beyond the trees. Something was coming, something dark and inevitable. Lysander looked up, eyes sharp. "They are coming," he said, almost in a whisper. "Those who seek to use the power you now guard, they have found the path here." Kalen rose, tension coiling in his muscles. "Then we will face them," he said. His hand went to his sword, though he knew that steel alone would not protect them. "Together," the child nodded. "Together," he repeated, and Kalen felt a surge of resolve. No matter the danger, no matter the darkness, they would face it side by side. The bond forged between them, man, child, and wolves, was stronger than fear, stronger than shadow, stronger than any magic that threatened them. But the forest of Wraithwood did not yield easily. From the edge of the clearing, a whispering laugh echoed, a sound that chilled the bones and stirred the shadows deeper. Kalen's eyes narrowed. "Prepare yourselves," he said to the wolves. "The real trial begins now." The wolves circled tighter, their growls low but steady. Lysander's small hand found Kalen's again, and the Alpha King felt the power of trust, of courage, of something far greater than himself. Together, they would face whatever the forest held. Together, they would confront the darkness that waited in the shadows. Kalen's heart pounded, not with fear but with determination. This child, these wolves, this bond, they had shown him a truth he had long denied. That strength was not domination and power was not control. True strength lay in courage, in trust, and in the willingness to let someone else share the burden of destiny. And as the wind howled through Wraithwood, carrying whispers of danger and prophecy, Kalen knew one thing with unwavering certainty. He would not let this bond break. He would protect Lysander, and he would face the trials ahead. Because some bonds, once formed, could not be broken, and some destinies demanded courage beyond imagination. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the hills surrounding Eldrath. Golden rays touched the castle towers, turning stone into fire and shadow into hope. The forest beyond stirred with life. The wolves padded silently through the undergrowth, senses sharp, guarding the borders of their kingdom. Kalen stood at the edge of the clearing, his gray eyes scanning the horizon. Beside him, Lysander crouched lightly, his small hand resting on the fur of the largest wolf. The child's calm presence was a steadying force in Kalen's chest, and for the first time in decades, he felt that balance, that clarity, that strength born not of fear, but of trust. The storm of Wraithwood had passed, but the danger that awaited was far greater. Rival lords, greedy for power and whispering of the prophecy Lysander carried, had begun to move, sending agents to claim the child's magic. Kalen knew they would not stop until they had taken what was not theirs. But this time, he would not be unprepared. "Are you ready?" Lysander asked softly, his eyes steady, bright with quiet courage. Kalen's hand tightened around his sword hilt, though he knew it was not the steel that would protect them. "I am," he said. "We face them together." The wolves growled low, circling Kalen and Lysander protectively. Their eyes flicked to the trees, ears swiveling for the slightest sound. Kalen felt the power of the pack, their loyalty unshakable and the connection between them all. A bond stronger than any magic or army filled him with confidence. From the shadows of the forest, figures emerged. Mounted men with gleaming armor, their banners flapping in the morning wind, rode cautiously toward the clearing. Their leader, a tall man with sharp features and a cruel smile, dismounted and stepped forward. "Alpha King Kalen," he said, his voice sharp and commanding. "Step aside, the child is ours, his power will belong to the rightful ruler." Kalen's gray eyes narrowed. "He belongs to no one but himself," he said, his voice cold and steady, "and I will not allow harm to come to him." The man laughed, sharp and bitter. "You are only one. You cannot stop us." Kalen's hand moved to Lysander's shoulder. "Stay close," he said quietly. The child nodded, understanding the weight of the moment. Then the wolves moved. In a flash of motion and sound, they were between Kalen and the invaders. Their growls rolled like thunder, their teeth bared not in blind rage but in disciplined, controlled fury. The rival soldiers faltered, taken aback by the ferocity of creatures they had never dared to face. Kalen stepped forward, his cloak swirling, eyes blazing with authority. "Leave now," he commanded. "Turn back or face the consequences." The leader's smile faltered. He had underestimated the power of Kalen's pack and the bond that united man, child, and wolves, but he was not yet defeated. "Then you force my hand," he snarled, drawing a sword. Kalen did not move immediately. Instead, he called upon something deeper than steel. The bond he shared with Lysander pulsed like a living thing, filling him with courage and clarity. He felt the child's magic intertwine with the wolves' instinct, forming a shield and a force that no mortal could break. In a swirl of motion, Kalen and the wolves surged forward. The battle was brief but intense. The soldiers, unprepared for the unity and strength before them, faltered and fled. Kalen's sword struck with precision, his movements fluid, yet controlled, not in rage but in protection. Every move was guided by trust, by the bond he shared with Lysander and the pack. When the dust settled, the clearing was quiet. The rival leader had fled, leaving his men scattered in fear. The wolves circled Kalen and Lysander, tails high, their growls low and steady, a song of victory and loyalty. Kalen turned to the child, kneeling to meet his eyes. "Are you unharmed?" he asked, voice soft but full of concern. "I am," Lysander said, smiling faintly, "because you were brave enough to trust yourself and me." Kalen felt his chest tighten. He realized in that moment that the child had not only survived danger, but had also helped him face the shadows within himself. He had learned to trust, to act despite fear, and to see that love and loyalty were the truest forms of strength. Days passed after the battle, and the castle of Eldrath slowly returned to its rhythm. The court watched with awe as Kalen openly acknowledged Lysander, not as a ward or a charge, but as an equal in spirit and purpose. The child's wisdom and courage impressed even the oldest advisors, and the wolves' calm, protective presence reassured the people. Kalen, once cold and distant, found himself laughing more, listening more, and opening his heart to possibilities he had never imagined. The bond with Lysander and the wolves had transformed him, teaching him that true leadership was not fear but trust, not isolation but connection. One evening, Kalen and Lysander walked through the castle gardens, the sun setting in a blaze of gold and crimson. The wolves padded silently behind them, alert but relaxed. The Alpha King stopped at a fountain, watching the water ripple in the fading light. "You have changed everything," Kalen said quietly, turning to the child. "Not just the wolves, not just me, but the entire kingdom." Lysander smiled softly. "We changed together," he said. "The forest, the pack, you, all of us. We could not have done it alone." Kalen nodded, feeling the truth of those words. The journey had not been easy. They had faced darkness, danger, and the shadows of Kalen's own past. Yet through it all, the bond between them had only grown stronger. As night fell, the stars reflected in the calm waters of the fountain, and Kalen realized something profound. Love, courage, and trust were not weaknesses. They were the sources of real power. He had spent centuries believing he must rule with iron control, but the child had shown him that strength lay in connection, in the willingness to share the burdens of life and destiny. The wolves gathered around them, settling comfortably, their eyes glowing softly in the moonlight. Kalen reached down, running a hand through the fur of the largest wolf, feeling the warmth and loyalty that had once seemed untouchable. "You have done more than survive," Kalen whispered to Lysander. "You have taught me what it means to live." The child's small hand rested lightly on Kalen's. "And you have taught me," Lysander said. "That courage is more than facing enemies. It is opening your heart, even when the shadows are near." Kalen felt a smile tug at his lips, something rare and genuine. He had faced many battles, but this was the most important. Not because of victory, but because of transformation. The child, the wolves, the bond they shared, it had changed everything, including him. As dawn rose over Eldrath, Kalen stood atop the castle walls, watching the forest stretch endlessly beyond. The kingdom was safe for now. The rivals had been defeated, and the prophecy, though still whispered in hidden corners, was no longer a threat, it was a promise. A promise of growth, unity, and unexpected bonds that could not be broken. Lysander joined him, small hand in Kalen's. "Do you see it?" the child asked softly. "The future?" Kalen's eyes softened. "I see more than the future," he said. "I see the present, and I understand it for the first time. We are not alone, and we are not powerless. Together, we are stronger than any shadow, any curse, any danger that may come." The wolves padded up beside them, silent guardians of their bond. Kalen knelt, letting Lysander climb onto his shoulders, the child's laughter echoing across the morning air. The Alpha King felt a joy he had never known, a calm strength that was not imposed but earned. And in that moment, Kalen understood the truth that the forest, the wolves, and the child had revealed to him. Life was not about dominion or fear or isolation. It was about trust, courage, and the willingness to love. The kingdom of Eldrath would flourish, not because of power or magic, but because the Alpha King had learned to open his heart. And as he looked down at Lysander laughing among the wolves, Kalen knew that some bonds once formed could never be broken, because they were stronger than fear, stronger than shadow, stronger than any curse. And in the quiet light of dawn, Kalen smiled, truly and freely, knowing that this was only the beginning of a life shaped by courage, love, and the impossible bond between a king, a child, and the wolves who had taught them both to see the world in a new way.